right, hello everybody. I'm going to try to get the microphone set up a little bit different. Please tell me if it's too quiet or too loud. All right, so we've got a question already. Cardo says, hey, hi Eddie. Well, hello Cardo. Are you familiar with Stork mouthpieces and with Monet? Um, I'm familiar more with Stork than I am. Hello Gabrielle, nice to see you. I'm more familiar with Stork than I am with the Monet. I only know my knowledge of Monet and my experience with Monet mouthpieces is very shallow. I do understand them. I understand that they are different in their design, uh, the Monet that is, and that they're supposed to be played differently. I understand that much, and uh, but my knowledge of the mouthpiece stops there. I haven't had a bunch of them. Stork, however, in the early 90s, I started playing on Warburton mouthpieces, and I probably played on Warburton for about 10 years. And when I switched from Warburton, I went from Warburton to Stork. And the Storks worked well for me. I went through a period where I lost a lot of weight. I used to be almost 300 pounds. In fact, I could have maybe been over 300 pounds at one point. And you know that changes your face. And at one point, and I also have this very bad habit of lending my mouthpieces out to students and not ever getting them back. And I have sort of stopped doing that because it's a very expensive thing. Um, anyway, so yes, I like the Storks. I quit using Stork when I lost my train of thought. I quit using Stork when my face changed and I lost all that weight. So, and I don't remember what I went through like 4 or 5 different mouthpieces after the Stork. I'm back with Warburton now. I think you guys know that already. And that said, I'm still going through the fitting process, and I haven't found anything that I like as much as my Shelky mouthpieces, the F1 and the M1, for my regular everyday mouthpiece. I use Warburton now for my flugelhorn, piccolo trumpet, and lead trumpet playing. But for now, I'm going through this fitting process to see what I like, and I still haven't found anything to replace the the Storks. I mean, the Warburtons. All right, Janelle is here. Hello, Janelle. She says, Eddie, good to see you, and it's nice to see you. Thanks for visiting. Um, Karen is here too. Hello, Karen. Karen says, good day. Sean Burton is here. Hello, Sean. Gabrielle says, Eddie, while I play, do I have to be aware of the position of the tongue or does it have to move freely? Yes, is the answer. There are times when you should be aware and times when you should not be aware. The time when you should be aware is when you're working on that, right? Let's say let's say you want to work on the position of the tongue, then spend some time focusing on the position of the tongue. Other than that, stop that. Don't do that. Okay, when you're playing outside of that context, you should not be thinking about the position of the tongue. Remember, we want all of this stuff to work for us automatically. We want it to be uh, second nature, an automatic response to our thoughts. And you can't get that without practicing that. You can't have that automatic response happen without um, doing that with some of your time. I hope that makes sense. Anthony, hello, Anthony. Anthony says, hello, Eddie. I like your videos on sight reading. Good name. I find that sight reading is hard because sometimes I cannot hear the conductor call out the number where we are at. Oh, yes, I have the same problem. I don't know if I've told you guys on this Q and A before, but the reason I gave up my pursuit of an orchestral career was because of my hearing loss. I had a disastrous audition. I drove all the way to Colorado Springs. I went into my audition, I played my pieces, and while I was there, the monitor left. And the rules are you're not allowed to speak to the judges. They speak to you, you do what they say. And I finished all my pieces, and they go, and I'm like, we're not allowed to speak, right? I couldn't even say, what did you just ask me? Can you please speak up? We're not supposed to speak. The monitor's not here. And I just walked out. I was devastated. You know, my whole life, my whole career was pointing towards becoming an orchestral trumpet player. And that, you know what? I made that decision back in the days when it wasn't just the thing everybody did. Today, you say, oh, I'm going to be an orchestral trumpet player because how else are you going to make a living? Right? As a trumpet player, if you want to be a trumpet player, you join the army band or you a military band or you join the orchestra. And for me, I actually had 2 seasons with the El Paso Symphony and 5 seasons with the UTEP Orchestra. I was 2 seasons, 3 seasons with the El Paso Youth Symphony, um, and then orchestra concerts at high school. This was a music that I fell in love with and I wanted to play. The problem was, and this is what I was thinking on the way home, the problem is I can't hear. Most of those conductors have foreign accents, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And I'm driving home from uh, Colorado Springs, and I'm thinking, if I can't hear the guy on the other side of the screen that's just 10 foot away, how am I going to hear a conductor that's 30, 40 feet away? How am I going to hear that? Right? So it's not, that just wasn't doable. So I decided on the way home from that audition that it just wasn't right for me with this disability to pursue an orchestra career. Now, don't take that as and don't interpret what I just said that people with hearing loss should not play in ensembles. I think it's different for you, Anthony, if you're playing in a community band. That's the point of the community band, is to accommodate people that are not going to do it professionally. So I'm not saying that you should not be. I'm saying I could not make my living that way, knowing that I was going to be a burden on the people around me. Now, I have had one job, one gig with the Houston Symphony. They told me when they called me, they said, there's somebody we call for lead, there's someone we call for jazz, but we needed for this gig someone that played both. And he said, I was at the top of the list. And so I did play a gig. It's funny because I played first trumpet and John DeWitt played second trumpet on the songs that I played on, except for the overture which he played first trumpet, I played second trumpet. So I got to play with my dream came true with the Houston Symphony. I got to sit on stage with the Houston Symphony. It was what's that guy's name? It was a pops concert. It wasn't a regular concert. It was a pops concert. But anyway, I was telling him backstage. I was telling John backstage this story, and he says, "Oh man, you should have pursued it anyway because help each other out like that." And I understand that. And that was a very nice thing for him to say. I just can't do that. I can't be the guy that on purpose puts myself as a burden to other people. I can't do that. So anyway, um, that's my story for that. Okay, let me get to some of these, and then I'll get to the written down ones. A forgetful person. Hello, a forgetful person. Um, he says, or he or she says, have you started working on the new TMEA All-State Jazz Music yet? By working on it, I'm assuming you mean writing etudes. I wrote 3 etudes. We'll see if they picked them or not. But I wrote 3 etudes. I'm a little embarrassed because last year I put 2 of them in the same key and almost the same changes, and that was embarrassing. And this year I said I'm not going to do that, and I ended up putting all 3 of them in the same key. So I'm very, very embarrassed. That might actually limit the chances that they actually pick even 2 of my etudes this year. So okay, Anthony said, and also because sight reading is hard because every measure seems to have a different notes or rhythm. Yeah. My wife asked me if I was a joker when I was young. Yes, I can see that. Sean says, if someone just plays a trumpet only, can you find one mouthpiece for everything you play? And for example, playing bright versus playing smoky. Some people can do that, and some people can't. That's a very personal thing. Anthony says, I'm old. All right. Janelle says, oh, I'm sorry about that rough audition. Oh, well, that's all right. You know, things happen the way they do for a reason. And I don't have regrets. Really, I don't have regrets when it comes to my decisions. I don't have regrets about my decisions. There are things that I don't know how to describe it. They're not regrets. Um, they're not regrets. It's just that sometimes you lament stuff that might have happened, but that's actually not a healthy thing anyway, right? Gabriel says, Eddie, could you please explain better what the angles of the embouchure are and how they need to be moved when playing high according to your method? It's not really my method. It's the Reinhardt method, Dr. Reinhardt. I think his first name is Charles, I think. And it's an individual thing. So the way I teach it is that you should hold the trumpet in a way that accommodates those angles. Don't try to force it. So what we want to do is have the wrist be like a fulcrum for the horn. And I teach my students that if you hold the horn static and play up and down, you're going to get wrong pressure on top lip or the bottom lip. So there's an exercise I teach my students that without playing, and it's an exaggerated movement, and it's not the movement you would do on the horn, but just to exercise this wrist, you put the horn on your chops, hold your arm here, and you just use your head to turn the bell. So if I demonstrate that with a lip slur, You see what I'm doing? I'm letting the horn respond to the angle of my head. Now, some people pivot the way I just pivoted, where the the high notes, the head is up and the bell is down. For low notes, the head is down and the bell is up. Right? Some people do it that way. Some people actually do the opposite. And those opposite players are what we call upstream trumpet players. But if you get deep into the Reinhardt method, he talks about not just the angle that goes up and down, but he says some people are this way and that way. So that's why my approach to that is to just play naturally and let the instrument go where it needs to go. Hold the instrument in a way that it's got the freedom to do that. I see I've got a bushy beard again today. All right. Cardo says, well, the world lost a good classical player but gained a great trumpet pedagogue. Well, I'll tell you what, Cardo. I still consider myself a classical player. See, this is, and I'm not saying that that what you're saying is the same thing as what I'm about to say. Okay, but there is a mistake that people make. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're making the mistake, but there is a mistake that people make, equating orchestra music with classical music. Orchestra music is just a subset of classical. There are other there are other. I just did it too. There are other types of classical music that are not orchestra, and in fact, the way you play in an orchestra is different. It should be different. There's people who say, "Oh, I love this brass ensemble. I love this brass ensemble of orchestral players," and I'm telling you personally, that's not as nice. A lot of times, the people who say that, what they're hearing is an orchestra without the strings, right? They're hearing an orchestra section, playing like an orchestra section without the rest of the orchestra. To me, that's not appropriate. You know, you talk about what's appropriate for the orchestra with dire consequences if you don't do this right. Oh, shame on you. But they don't apply that the other way around. If you play like you're in an orchestra for a brass ensemble, for a any kind of chamber ensemble, for in a trumpet duet, as a soloist with an organ, it's supposed to be different. It's not supposed to be the same. So I still consider myself a classical player. I am not an orchestral player. They're not the same thing. Okay. So, and I'm not saying that like shame on you. I'm not saying it that way. I'm just being clear about what that story means to me. I gave up on an orchestral career. I did not stop pursuing classical. Now, I can tell you this. You know, my first trumpet album is called Trumpet Quasi Master because I took a lesson from a famous classical trumpet player. And he told me when I played something for him, he said, that's not classical music. He said, that's quasi classical. And I think he meant it as a constructive criticism. But, you know, since that day, you know what, and to be fair, I took it as a constructive criticism. And in fact, this was before that audition that this happened. So I hadn't given up on my orchestral career yet. So I'm working through this process right in my head, and I realized, you know what? I think being a quasi-classical player is the best kind of classical player, if you ask me, right? If I'm doing something different enough that they can say, yes, this is classical, but no, that's not right. Well, then I'm doing it right because I'm putting my own thing into it. And that thing that I've got is rooted in the tradition of trumpet playing. So when you look at my videos online that are more classical in nature, there's something to them that makes them different from the other classical ensemble pieces out there, right? That's what we want. If you're not going to be an orchestra player, then you're not supposed to play like everybody else. If you are an ensemble player, then that's the whole point, is to try to match everyone else. You have to do that, or you're not going to get hired. But if you're doing your own thing, and this is for everything else besides large ensemble. If you're doing brass quintet, brass quartet, this idea that you're supposed to play those like you're in an orchestra, that's just wrong. That is philosophically wrong, which means that it's not actually wrong, but it's philosophically wrong. In my philosophy, that's just not how it should be. I don't even think you should play one type of music in the orchestra the same as another type. So anyway, Anthony says, do we have a trumpet player in our orchestra who never seems to lose count no matter how long the rest are? Yeah, you can get there. You can get there. And I'll tell you what, I approach that from both sides. I do a real good job of counting, but I also do a good job of marking my part. This is a professional trick for you to do. This is how the pros do it. If you got like 90 measures rest, but in 16 measure things, then at each section you write in very light pencil, you write what's happening at this point. If the French horns come in on that measure, then you say horns. If the trombones have a glissando, you put bone gliss. That way, if you lose count, you can at least wait for these cues that help you figure out where you are. So Gabriel says, what about fingers, flat or curved? Both. um, let's talk about the reason you want to have them. Okay, do you know what? Instead of answering that question the way you're asking it, let me tell you about my way of playing. Because I had carpal tunnel syndrome. This was during a time when I was lifting weights. I would like to get back into that again. I was lifting weights. I was doing a lot of typing every day, and I was practicing for between 4 and 8 hours a day. And I got to where I couldn't open a doorknob. And the way I fixed that, after learning as much I could about carpal tunnel, is I took my hand, you can't see it from here, but I just let my hand fall to my side, and I picked it up without letting it move, right? So I picked it up. This is how it looks when I'm just laying it down, right? And this is how I play. Okay, if I get lazy, I can do this. Okay, so what that looks like from here is like this. What it looks like from here is like this. Okay. And I'd never, ever, ever do this. The only time I do that is if I'm holding the horn. I put the pinky on top. Sometimes I'll lift it up. And what I've been doing lately, because I've been holding the horn a little bit too tight lately, I've been taking my thumb off and just playing like this. Okay? That's how I do it. That's how I teach it. Um, do I have a problem with doing this? No, I don't have a problem with that. Basically what you want to do is be consistent. But if you want to do the best that you can do, I do believe my system that I came up with is the best. I think this is the best way to play. A lot of people can't do it because you can't grab the horn. But you shouldn't be grabbing the horn like that. Hello, Jeffrey. So Anthony says he never loses his place. Are some people better at this than other people at keeping good time? Yes, you can say that, but like I said, what I do is a very practical thing. You actually, by the way, I count on my fingers. I don't do it in my head. And I'm a professional. This is what I do, right? I count on my fingers. If there's a situation where I can't use my fingers, I'll use my toes. I know that sounds weird, but I actually do that. Okay, Konya says, I don't think it matters that much. My fingers are sort of between curved and straight. Yeah, some people really make a big deal out of that. Sean Burton says, how does someone decide if they need a medium large or a large bore trumpet? Does it really matter? Well, it matters when it comes to equipment. What we're looking for is what works best for us. So it's like going to the store and asking you know for if I'm buying a tuxedo, does it really matter if my tuxedo is a 43 or a 48 or a 39, right? Talking about coat sizes, I think. Yes, that kind of matters. But how do you find out if you now with buying a tuxedo, you just get measured and they do that for you. We don't have that for trumpet. Basically, you got to try one and see if it works better for you. And that's an expensive venture. So the best way to do that here in Texas is go to TMEA. You're allowed to go to TMEA you don't have to be a member. You can just buy a pass to get into the convention and go try trumpets. That's the best way to figure that out. Gabriel says, do you ever practice with the left hand? Is it useful? This book that I've been working on for like 3 years now, that's actually in there. I have 7 stages in the book for preparing a piece of music, and playing with the left hand is in the 6th stage. It's a stage that I call over preparing. And I used to have this student, a Chinese girl, who would finish her all-state music. So she'd do that's what I love about these kind of students, right? They do what I say. And so she's finished with it with 3 weeks to spare or whatever. And she's doing this 6th step that most of my, because they're they take too much. She got it done. She was very diligent at that. And we did this left hand thing. She played through the etudes left hand. And then after that, she broke her right hand and had to go to the audition left-handed. And she won. And I have to think, now, Playing the trumpet left-handed is not so that you can play left-handed. Playing the trumpet left-handed is to prepare you for crazy stuff that could happen in your performance. But in this case, the very thing that she trained to be prepared for things that could happen, prepared her for that thing to happen. And she had a cast in this hand and held the trumpet up and played the etudes with the left hand. So Karen says, we had measures of rest with cues, works to write down the total number instead of trying to follow. Yeah, so like I said, I do both. I write cues in. If the cues are not already written, I write my own cues, and then I do my best to count. A lot of people get lazy with the counting because it's boring, right? It's boring. But what I do is I do my best to count, and I also write in the cues. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start reading some of these that people sent in. I've got 3 from, let me not get his name right, get his name wrong, David. David said, Eddie, I was wondering the importance of practicing rhythms for jazz improv. Some videos I have seen online prioritize rhythms over scales. I know that if I play scales, you are learning rhythm, but I mean practicing one note with many different rhythmic concepts with a metronome or backing track. Is this something you would recommend, or do you think it just comes with experience and time? So, let's establish this fact first. In all music, rhythms are more important than notes. I'm going to say that again because it's so extremely important. In all music, rhythms and meter for that matter, rhythms and meter are more important than notes. And one of the ways that I've demonstrated that in the past is to play a simple melody with all the wrong notes, and then play a different simple melody with all the wrong notes and the right rhythm, and then play a different melody, another simple melody with all the wrong rhythms but the right notes. The one of those two that's indistinguishable is the one that's had the rhythms changed. It doesn't matter what notes you play that simple melody, they're going to know what melody you're playing. You can miss as many notes and people are going to still get the idea. So in all music, rhythms are more important than notes. And this is partly one of the reasons why traditional jazz education falls short, is because it's so note centric. It's so much about what notes do you play over what chords. And I think it's a terrible, terrible, terrible way to practice jazz. And in fact, I'm gonna go one more and say the way you're putting this, you're making it sound like it's an either or, and maybe you don't intend to do this, but you're making it sound like it's either, which one should I do? Practice the scales or practice the rhythms? I'm thinking, why do you have to choose, right? Why do you have to choose? Why would you not play the scales so that you have rhythms? Doing rhythmic exercises is a great idea. Doing scales is a great idea. Now, what's the best way to incorporate rhythms into your improv? There's 2 very, very important things you can do instead of doing an exercise. 2 extremely important things you can do. You can do listening. The more you listen to jazz, the more your rhythms are going to be right. Number two is to practice transcriptions. You can do transcriptions that you did yourself by ear, you can do the ones that you wrote down, or you can buy transcription books in the store. All three of them contribute to your rhythmic feel. Okay? So I know that's a lot. Jazz is, when it comes to all the material you should practice as a jazz player, it's about 10 to 20 times more material than what you should practice to be a classical player. It's a lot of work. Now, let me be clear about that. It's a lot of work if you want to be great at it. If you want to just play the songs, it's not that bad. I have students that do okay, and they don't do a lot of work, but they're not that good, right? Does that make sense? And when I say they're not that good, I mean they're not anywhere near professional level, not anywhere near. And it's because they have not committed to doing that much work. I think if you want to be a great jazz player, you're looking at a minimum of 2 hours of practice per day, averaged out over the week. So that way you can have some days you practice more, some days you practice less. Remember my philosophy about when is it okay to practice a lot? Because you've heard me say that I don't believe in practicing every day. I don't believe in just putting in time to prove that you deserve to be a great trumpet player. I think that's a really messed up concept. You can't just put time into the horn and expect results. So when someone asks, I'll tell them I don't tell my students they have to practice all the time. It depends, what are you trying to do? So I have a video out where I talk about when is it okay to practice a lot? And the answer is when you have a deadline. Now, if you want to be a great trumpet player, there is a great jazz trumpet player. There is so much work that's got to be done that if you want to get it done in 10 years, you need to do at least 2 hours of trumpet playing, jazz practice per day. So some people might think I'm being inconsistent. That's not inconsistent. Okay? Anthony says, the other night we had a rehearsal, played a hymn for church, was a simple 3/4 time piece, but the ties made it difficult to play because it didn't sound like 3/4. Yes, that's a phenomenon. That's when the music sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I'm not putting people down. Sometimes that's the composer's fault. Remember, I am a composer too. Over represent my music in the way that makes it sound like what it is. And a lot of times, I've written a lot of charts that I'm reading it and I'm thinking I wouldn't have done that. And some of it's standard stuff too. Oh, let me do another one of these written ones and I'll get back to Cardo. David says, sometimes while playing, I have trouble moving from high register to low register, and while keeping my embouchure sealed properly, and subsequently small amounts of air gets released through the parts of my lips not contained by the mouthpiece. I have tried more pressure with the mouthpiece, but it doesn't seem to help. That sounds like, I can't be absolutely sure, but that sounds like a pivot problem. If you hold your horn static and go up in that upper register, your face changes. And if you don't do that exercise that I showed you earlier and hold the horn that way so that it accommodates, then the angle will come to where there's too much pressure here, not enough pressure here, and it will come out. The air will come out. So it sounds like you need to allow your horn to pivot as you play. I can't be 100% about that. I would have to see you to answer that question 100% sure. But that's what it sounds like to me. All right, Cardo. Eddie, why is it that some days it takes me quite a deal of time to warm up? I have no clue. I have some ideas what it could be. Like, okay, let me give you an example. If you take ibuprofen, all the swelling in your face will go away and it will take more time. For me personally, partly for health reasons, but also because of this, I will not touch ibuprofen. I will not touch ibuprofen because the the it takes the swelling out. I've had disastrous gigs where I took, that sometimes if you have something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but you can get sometimes those big dog horse pill versions of the ibuprofen, maybe like, oh, I remember what it was. I had a brown recluse bite on my pinky, and so they gave me one of those, and I went to the gig, and I couldn't get the horn to play. So, most of us do rely on some swelling. We just don't want to have to swell too much, right? But if the swelling is completely gone, can't play. So it could be that. I'm not saying that's what it is for you. Um, there's a bunch of things that can cause you to not. So let me ask you this, Cardo. Do you use any of my routines, or are you using a different warm-up besides what I teach? Because that makes a difference. I know it sounds like I'm selling my products, but there's a reason why I put that stuff together. There's a reason why I use that series of exercises. All right, next written one. I've got a few more here to go. This is, oh, did I do all of David's? Oh, this is David. David says, this is my third and final question. While single tonguing, I sometimes stutter or pause for a moment before being able to continue. I do not know if this is a problem with my technique or just lack of practice. I have seen your video on tongue position, and I have tried to keep my tongue closer to my teeth, but I still have this stuttering problem. Thank you for answering. So if you were my student and that was happening, I would immediately assume you were practicing too fast. That's what I would think. Okay? So if that's what if you were my student, you came in here and you just couldn't keep your tongue going steady like that, I would think my first assumption would be that you're practicing too fast. You have to practice slow and deliberate, literally hundreds of times before you can. And what I mean by slow and what I mean by hundreds of times is when you do like the working backwards method, you will play that last two measures 10 times. Then you play these other two measures 10 times. Then you play these together 10 times. You've already got 30 times there. To go through a whole piece, let's say you have a whole page of tonguing. To go through a whole piece, you're practicing bits and pieces of it hundreds of times. And you want to do all of that. What I tell my students is that you want 60% of the desired volume. That's the tempo you practice at. 60% of the desired volume. I keep saying, you know what? I'm a little bit fuzzy today. I said volume. 60% of the desired tempo. I don't know where my head is today. So if it's, just to use the math, if it's 100, if the tempo you're trying to play at is 100, you play at 60. And you do it slow, you do it deliberately, you play it accurately, you do that hundreds of times. If you did that and then went back, and by the way, we don't creep it up. I hear people saying creep it up, creep it up, creep it up. That's for people who want a shortcut, really. And I know, yes, I was taught that way. Now that I know what I know about practicing, there's no benefit to turning the tempo up. There's no benefit to, so what I was taught was you do 10 times at this tempo, turn it one notch, go 10 more times, turn it one notch, go 10 more times. I'm telling you, from my experience, the way I teach, there's no benefit to that. And you can say, well, I know guys that made Allstate playing that way. Well, I made Allstate doing it that way too. I think what you benefited from that is just the repetition. Speeding it up did not help. Speeding it up, if you had not sped it up and did the same number of repetitions, you would have played better, not worse. So this thing about the repetitions, I think this is important. So yes, that's what I would say, is you're probably practicing too fast. Okay, this one's from Janelle. I don't know if Janelle's still with us. I have another question. How do you make your trumpet notes vibrate like a voice? All right, so vibrato, there's two forms of vibrato. I use both of them. I use one for jazz and one for classical. You don't have to do it that way, but it helps me feel different. So I specifically do classical this way. No, I'm sorry, that's jazz. Ha! I told you my head is fuzzy today. I do jazz this way, and I do classical with my jaw. Okay? And the piece I always use to demonstrate the classical vibrato is from Berlioz. I'm doing that all with my jaw. Now, there are actually other ways to do vibrato. I don't teach those. I think they're detrimental to trumpet playing. Okay, so if you hear someone say, I did this or I did that, yes, that's right. Don't do that. Okay? So, and then if I'm playing, I always demonstrate the jazz one with Misty. Okay? And one day we can talk about what the difference is between jazz vibrato and classical vibrato. So that's how we do it. And when you first start, you just want to play one note and make it very mechanical. So if you're doing classical music, I prefer F and just do the vibrato And exaggerate it. By the way, when you first start doing vibrato, don't worry about how bad it sounds. It's supposed to sound bad because you can't do it yet. Right? So um so hold the note and exaggerate the movement. The reason we exaggerate it is so that it makes a mental impression on us. Exaggerate the movement. Yes, when it's exaggerated, it sounds awful, but it gets you used to that movement. Then after you get to where you can do that on one note, stop exaggerating and let it be more more natural. All right. Karen says, would you suggest the pivot exercise with some of the lip slurs and articulation intervals? Yes, I would definitely. Well, okay, here's the thing. That's when you should think about pivoting, if that's what you're going to think about. I do not recommend thinking about pivoting, or any other physical stuff for that matter, when you're practicing music. So you got it right. When you're doing those exercises, try to make yourself do that without losing what you know you're supposed to do, right? So the air should not change. Okay? The air should not change. The embouchure should not change. What I mean by the embouchure should not change is you need to keep the setting the way it's supposed to be. Then over the top of that, you experiment on the slurs and on the intervals with different positions. Now, let me be clear about this. I don't care what some famous pedagogue, whatever, says. I use my head to pivot. Okay? This is a high note, this is a low note. Some people are the opposite. This is high, this is low. Okay? Um, and that's how you would experiment, right? You experiment with putting your head up for the high notes, putting your head down for the low notes. Now be careful because it's easy to do too much. And if you do too much, here's what happens a lot of times with this kind of stuff. People will do too much, say it didn't work, and then say, "Oh man, that guy teaches this stuff, and it didn't work." Right? Well, you didn't try it. You have to experiment. See if you go too high or too low. So you want to maybe next time not go as far because it truly is a very subtle thing. Okay, I have another question here from JP. You use your tongue anchored to the bottom lip to do lip buzzes, so tongue is vibrating with the lip. Absolutely not. Okay, I had a student that's how she learned how to play. So what he's talking about is vibrating the lip against the tongue. Okay, I can't do that. Um, and no, that's not what we're doing. That's not at all what we're doing. Okay, that was a quick one. Anthony says, "Hey Eddie, is this okay to use for sight reading?" I don't know if Anthony's still here. He was talking about my hymn stuff that I put up that has the the music on the screen. And yes, of course, that's okay to use with sight reading. Now, if what you meant was, is it okay to do the sight listening? Yes, the answer is yes for that too. Okay, so either way, however you meant it, yes is the answer. Okay, Cardo says, I use a different routine for years now. So here's the thing. Why don't you experiment with the physical trumpet pyramid? That way you don't have to change what you're practicing. You just take your routine and do it in a different order. Same exercises that you're already doing, but change the order. And that's your first step into seeing if because if you do, right, so that's how it should be anyway, right? You take what you said you've been doing it for years now. If you did, if you changed the order, you wouldn't be disrupting your life, right? It would just be a very subtle change. Now, maybe you're already doing something sort of like that, but yes, the physical trumpet pyramid shows you how to do that order, what order to put those in. And I think it's the order that helps you make those comebacks easier. Okay, hello, Black Hole. He says, hey, do you have any opinions on the wedge mouthpieces? I was thinking on buying one. I don't really have an opinion. I have a student. He's a sixth grader, and he's already playing. This is not an exaggeration. He's already playing in his local big band. Huh? And he plays on a wedge. Now, that's not an endorsement of the wedge mouthpiece. Uh, he got the wedge, I think, for Christmas this year. But he's playing in a big band as a sixth grader, a professional big band that does gigs. Now he hasn't done a gig yet. He only started like a month ago. And I don't know when they do start playing gigs. We'll see. I hope they keep him on because that would be good for him. But yes. So, one of the things that trumpet teachers do so they can get more students is they tell you all the wonderful things about their um, students, like their famous ones especially. Uh, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I don't do that. Okay? Having a sixth grader in a professional jazz ensemble is the kind of thing someone would say if they were trying to get you to take lessons with them, right? But the truth is, I could give you a long, long, long list of things like that my students have accomplished. And you know what? To me, what makes people wow, ooh, wow, yeah, oh, is usually not the stuff that impresses me. So anyway. So let me tell you one thing I do think about the wedge mouthpiece, and maybe the literature that they have talks about this, but you have to clock it. And what clocking is when you get the mouthpiece exactly like where it needs to be, you have to play it in a way that actually matches your lips. Otherwise, you're actually making it worse, not better. So, and maybe that's common sense, duh kind of thing. But to me, it seems really important to make sure that you're playing it in the right angle. Cardo says, considering seriously to use the physical trumpet method. Okay, so there is a video. You don't have to necessarily buy the book. The book just dives into the details a little bit deeper. And I'm not trying to discourage you from the book. It's just that information is already online. And so why don't you, Cardo, give it a try? Just changing the order, like I said, and give it a try for 2 weeks and then come back and let us know how that went. All right. Okay, Janelle says that was excellent. Well, great, thank you. And she says, I said she. I, sorry. Um, now I'm embarrassed. Uh, says thank you, Eddie. You're welcome. All right. I'm turning red now. Um, any other questions? We're done with the written ones. Any other questions? Oh, we're out of time. Well, give me, if you have any questions, let me know, and then we will close it down. Ellie L. Corey. My tooth digs into my lips when playing. Well, hello, Ellie. My tooth digs into my lips when playing. How can I stop this from happening? That might be the size of your mouthpiece. If you have a mouthpiece that's not the right size, that's why I play. That's why I use the size that I have, because I have 3 corners I have to get the mouthpiece around. If the mouthpiece is too small, I actually get that too. So it could be a mouthpiece issue. It could be that you're using too much pressure. But like I said, for me, it doesn't matter how much pressure I use. I've got sharp angles, and just regular trumpet playing will cut my lips if I have the wrong size mouthpiece. So that's something to consider, is uh, checking out the size. If you have access to different sizes, uh, you want to try out every different size. And what the size that we're talking about is the rim size, the so the diameter. So in most mouthpieces, that's represented by the number. So like my teeth, I got 3 of these, so I have to play on something about the size, one size bigger than a Bach 1. Okay. Cardo says Karen says thanks, you're welcome. Cardo says thank you, Eddie. I will start doing that right away. Well, great. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. God bless you all, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Oh, where's my head? We'll see you guys next time.